488-9303. The experts at Beacon stand ready to take your stress away. Learn more at askbeaconnow.com.
Sunny and 26 degrees on Music Row. It's 4:01. I'm John Michael with your top stories. Ahead of a high-stakes meeting today at the White House to discuss supplemental spending deals between President Biden and congressional leaders, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is in the Capitol telling reporters he feels confident a continuing resolution can be passed by the Senate and the House and be signed by the president before Friday's deadline for a partial government shutdown.
Obviously, this week we have to pass a continuing resolution. We expect to be able to accomplish that, maybe with a few amendments to make sure the government doesn't shut down.
High temperatures are forecasted to be in the mid-30s on Thursday, but there is another chance for snow as temperatures dip below freezing again on Friday, and single digits are coming in over the weekend. TVA's Scott Brooks says the system is holding up well to overwhelming power demand.
Folks would avoid using their major appliances like washer, dryer, dishwasher, that kind of thing during those morning hours. That can help shave off some of the peak and also help people, more importantly, save money on their power bills.
TVA also says they can still benefit greatly if customers knock down the thermostat a couple of degrees. Traffic and a complete weather forecast are coming up in a few moments. Do you mooch off somebody else's Costco membership? Maybe flash their card when you walk in? Costco is cracking down, says ABC's Alex Stone.
Already, Costco has been surprising some people checking out by asking for an ID with their membership card, but now Costco is trying out a new system requiring customers scan their membership card when they enter the store. The scanners are now popping up at some test stores, much like Netflix and other streaming sites cracking down on password sharing. Costco says membership sharing has grown since the pandemic, and now it's cracking down on it.
Just can't get away with anything these days. That's the latest news. Traffic and weather are next. I'm John Michael, WTN News.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer.
It is 7 minutes now past the hour of 4 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. I'm Brian Wilson, your friend and radio buddy, back from Iowa, and happy to be back in the warmth of my studio here. The warm glow of the computer monitors and the printer, which has been working overtime. I like it when nice hot copy comes off the printer. It's good. It's toasty warm compared to what it was like in Iowa. Nice people. I mean, can you believe that I was allowed to get the keys to the church to do my live remote? They gave me the keys to the church. It's a huge Assembly of God church, and they just gave me an entry card. Yeah, just leave it in the office when you're done.
Wow.
That's just really trusting and nice people, good people there. But I'm glad to not be there. By the way, can I just say before I move on, coming out of Iowa, I drove out on, I think it's Interstate 80, going to the east of Des Moines. And it's where they had this very bad blizzard. And I'm not making it up. I bet there were 350, maybe 400 semi-trucks along a long strip of that interstate that were in the ditch still.
Oh, wow.
I mean, millions and millions of dollars of lost trucks and cargo that was, damaged perhaps.
Wow.
I mean, and I haven't heard that much about it, but I mean, it apparently was so bad. Now the Waze machine, I trust Waze in all things, had me come in a different way using state roads, which were bad, but at least I got there. I mean, I am certain that the interstates were just locked down in whiteout conditions, and I cannot begin to describe to you how many trucks that were in the ditch. It was really shocking, and other cars too. But I mean, these big semis did not do well. And, you got to wonder why they don't just pull over somewhere and ride it out.
They're on a deadline. They got to meet that schedule.
Big wheels are rolling. Got to keep them rolling. Big wheels are moving on. All right. Let's swamp it up if we could for just a moment here, because we got all kinds of stuff to talk about with regard to what's happening in the swamp, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about Lloyd Austin. Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, a lot of criticism about how he kept information from everybody about having to go to the hospital after he'd had some elective surgery. It wasn't elective surgery, really. It was for a prostate cancer. But he got out, and then things got complicated, and he had to go back in, and he was at home, and they called for an ambulance. It must be nice to be the Secretary of Defense to have somebody who can handle that for you. Excuse me, I'm having a personal crisis. I need an ambulance. Could you call me an ambulance, please? And one of his aides did call for an ambulance, and it's very clear from the nature of that conversation, they were thinking from the very beginning of keeping this on the down low.
Can I ask, can the ambulance not show up with lights and sirens? We're trying to remain a little subtle.
So they were thinking right from the start, we want to keep this quiet. which I think is interesting. By the way, the answer was, well, they are required to use their lights and sirens. We're on the main roads, but they usually turn them off when they pull into a neighborhood. All right, so apparently it was noted and told, yeah, that's probably what we'll do anyway. So anyway, he's now back home. He's working from home. Those slackers who work at home, I mean, come on. We all know they're not really doing anything. They're not really working.
The nerve of them.
The nerve of those people. I have about 6 stories here about the ongoing negotiations between the House, the Senate, and the White House about, a budget. Ultimately, it's about a budget deal. But, I mean, the House Republicans have said, and they're standing by it, that we are not going to give you some of the things that you want, like support for Israel, support for Ukraine, until we get some real movement on changing up the situation at the border. Now, having said that and having laid down that marker, most of the negotiations has been going on between the White House and the Senate. And so let me see if I've got a bunch of different stories, and they all have sort of a different take on it. Number one, this is from the Washington Times. House Speaker Mike Johnson said securing the U.S.-Mexico border with real transformative policy change is crucial in his meeting with the president, which just broke up a few moments ago. Representative Johnson, Louisiana Republican, slated to meet with the president, 3 other congressional leaders, to discuss the White House's $110 billion supplemental funding request that includes emergency spending for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. That package has been snarled by Senate negotiations to include more conservative border policy changes. Mr. Johnson said he would make it clear to Mr. Biden that border security must be a priority over anything else in the spending request, including funding for Ukraine's war against Russia. And I just happened to catch a little bit during the commercial break of Chuck Schumer coming to the microphones outside the White House, out there on the White House Drive, and he said that he was more optimistic now that some kind of deal could be brokered, but I have not heard exactly where they are with regard to the Republican desire to secure the border. And then there's this story from thehill.com. Speaker Mike Johnson voiced his skepticism of a deal being crafted in the Senate to pair border and migration policy changes with Ukraine aid. He said if he dismissed any comprehensive immigration changes. And in other words, complex means, okay, amnesty, more work visas, etc. There's a whole lot of things that the Democrats want that he considers comprehensive. What he really wants is very simple, it would seem to me. Secure the border. Before we do anything else, secure the border. You can't do that quickly, the things they're asking for. I do think it's past time to secure the border, and that's what H.R. 2 reflects. Johnson's comments, again, this was before the meeting, which just broke up a few moments ago. All right. But there is this. This is from the Washington Times. House Speaker Mike Johnson on Wednesday, facing a revolt within the Republican conference, defended his spending deal with Democrats-led Senate and his support for another stopgap bill to avert a partial shutdown. There's going to be another CR, it looks like. GOP lawmakers who control just a third of the power in Washington need to come to terms with the fact that they won't be getting everything they want. That's the reality of where we are. We're not going to get everything that we want, says Mr. Johnson, but we're going to stick to our core conservative principles. We're going to advance fiscal stewardship. Well, you know what? You may be in only 1/3 of the whole thing, but you can stop it. I mean, there's nothing that's going to happen without the House signing off on it. So you still have power, even though you have 1/3. You can shut things down. This is what divided government is, which means that if you want to stand your ground, you can block whatever they're doing. And I hope that they don't get wobbly on us, and I hope that they continue to work very closely to make sure that we do something about the border. You've got to do something about the border. I mean, look, I don't know where you are on Ukraine. There are a lot of people who want to continue to support Israel. And I think that's important. Taiwan, I think as well. But I mean, to the big degree, Ukraine is the more controversial one of the three. But listen, all of the polls show, even the presidential polls that have been taken, what are the issues that are important to Americans? Number one, it seems almost right up there with the economy, is immigration. It certainly was on the minds of the voters in Iowa. We know that for sure. The Supreme Court is doing some interesting stuff. Conservative justices seem poised to weaken power of federal agencies. During oral arguments, the court's conservative majority questioned a legal doctrine that gives agencies latitude to craft regulations. This would be huge. This would be incredibly important. If the Supreme Court thinks that lower courts are too readily finding ambiguity, they could reiterate that judges should more thoroughly use other tools of interpretation before deciding a statute is ambiguous. And then what happens is Congress will pass a bill, and then agencies then will take the bill and decide how they're going to implement it. And a lot of times they take a lot of liberties, and they say, well, Congress was vague on this, so we're going to fill in the blanks with our own regulations. And so this is all an attack against a big case known as Chevron. Brett Kavanaugh argued that Chevron doesn't provide the legal stability that the Biden administration and other supporters of the doctrine say that it does. The reality of how this works is Chevron itself ushers in shocks to the system. Every time a new administration comes in, whether it's communications law, securities law, competition law, environmental law, policy changes, or agencies interpret the statutes differently. That's what they do. I mean, that's why the Biden administration is able to pull off this nonsense on the border. Well, we saw what the law says, and this is our interpretation of it. The other administration may have had a different interpretation of it, but they try to take the vagaries in the law and they twist them to their own demands. And what this case that is pending right now may pare back the different bureaus and departments around the city of Washington, D.C. It may limit their ability to change the laws with regulations because they interpret it differently. I mean, we need less of that. The law is the law, and you cannot subvert the will of Congress and a bill that's been passed and signed into law by a previous president. But they do it, and they do it through all kinds of regulations and interpretations. And I'm hoping that the High Court, with its 6-3 conservative majority, will pare back on this and disabuse the Biden administration of the notion that they can just willy-nilly go in and rewrite the laws to their own liking, which is effectively what they're doing through executive orders and regulations. Finally, House Republicans are bringing 2 anti-abortion bills to the floor this week, coinciding with the 51st annual March for Life on Friday. Make no mistake, conservatives are here for unborn children and their mothers, and we want to ensure an expectant mother is empowered to raise her family, said Michael Fischbach, Republican of Minnesota. Supporting Pregnant and Parenting Women and Families Act, voted on Friday, seeks to prevent the Department of Health and Human Services from discriminating against pregnancy resource centers and the doling out of federal funds under Temporary Assistance to Needy Families, or TANF. Pregnancy resource centers are sometimes called by others crisis pregnancy centers, typically provide parental education and life skill training to expectant mothers, as well as material support for things such as diapers, formula, and clothing. These have been derided by abortion rights advocates as purveyors of medical misinformation because they generally do not provide abortion services or referrals. I like the direction that's going right there for sure. Again, the March for Life on Friday. 20 minutes now past the hour of 4 o'clock. King Associates and Insurance in Brentwood has been around for some 25 years, an independent agency, and that's right. And I'm telling you something, that's what you want. There's a lot of good reasons why an independent agency may better meet your needs for insurance. First of all, let's imagine that you go to the internet and you do business with one of those big internet companies. You know what they're doing? They have a set number of things they can do for you. They got a square peg and they're trying to shove it into a round hole. May not really meet your need, might be more expensive than what you need. So when you have an independent agent, they can shop around. They're not stuck with one product. They can look here. They can look there. They can give you, a panoply of potential options, and you can pick the one that very best meets your needs, the policy that works best for you. And that's a good thing, right? The other thing is customer service. When you need them, right? You don't want to be on a phone tree. You don't want to be listening to that recording say, I'm sorry, your call is important to us when you know it's not. Call this number, 615-329-8121. That's the number for King Associates Insurance in Brentwood. And you won't get a call center. You won't get a recording. You'll get an actual person every time. They're the kings of multi-policy discounts, 20, 25, 30, 35%. Huge savings. So get your royal review with King & Associates today. Log on to tkinginsurance.com. That's tkinginsurance.com. King Insurance & Associates, royal treatment and great rates. "25 minutes now past the hour of 4 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. Brian Wilson in the chair and on the air, giving you a look at what's going on weather-wise. We got a lot of weather news to talk about. Now, let's just talk about this for a moment. Today, it started, the low in Nashville was -1. That's pretty cold. But by the time the day is over, we right now we've got a balmy 25 degrees. We might hit 28, 26, 27 degrees, somewhere in there. But abundant sunshine, but not much happening in melting because it's still pretty cold, right? Tomorrow, we could see, overnight, we could see some more wintry mix move in, mostly, I think, to the northern part of our listening area, north of Nashville. 15 is the low, 35 the high. Friday, 13 the low, 32 the high. Saturday and Sunday, we're talking still very, very cold temperatures. Saturday, it only gets up to 20 degrees and never gets above freezing Saturday or Sunday. Sunday, 30. Then this is unbelievable. Listen to this. Monday, 42 for a high. Tuesday, 48 for a high. Wednesday, 55 for a high. Thursday of next week, we're talking next week, 63 for a high.
Wow.
And then as far as we can look, as Friday, as far as I can see on this particular model, 62 on Friday. So, I mean, we're going to have temperatures, if this is right and this forecast holds up, we're going to have temperatures in the 60s, the mid-60s, by the middle of next week.
That's crazy.
That's just nuts, isn't it? I mean, it'll get rid of everything. There may be some rain involved. In fact, they're saying that, sometimes there could be thunderstorms. I can only imagine when you're changing the temperature that much, that it would be a lot of unstable air in the area. So, look, it's wild and wacky, but I mean, this is deadly stuff. You need to respect it. And apparently 6 people have died as a result of winter storms so far in the state of Tennessee. The folks at TEMA, the Emergency Management Agency, said that 2 were reported in Shelby County, 1 in Hickman County, 1 in Madison County, and 2 in Washington County. The extremely cold temperatures across the region have increased the demand on power systems. And there for a while, it was TVA was saying, hey, could you back your thermostat down for a little bit? They've moved away from that as the day has gone on. But they said if you could lower your thermostat by 2 or 3 degrees, it would help. Don't use your large appliances. Postpone the use of hot water. Turn off and unplug non-essential lights and appliances. Now, I think they're saying that this is between 6 and 10 a.m. this morning, and they've sort of moved on from that. But, I mean, they promised us that they had done everything they could do to prevent brownouts or blackouts. But the question is, what's going on that they're now saying, hey, it'd be really good if you could help us out. Be a lamb and turn down your thermostat. To which you hear the reply, no way, no way. Peak power demands breaks the TVA record set in August of 2007. 34,526 megawatts when the temperature hit 4 degrees, an all-time TVA record. They say it's stable and everything has been working better than it did that time we had the really horrible situation. And then we had this story about out of B&A. Several passengers reported stuck on the tarmac for hours at B&A. Said that they got out there and on the tarmac and they were there forever, more than 3 hours. They had no place to go. And they were finally able to get off the ground at 8:15. I think it must have been when they had the big stop in traffic out there. It is now 4:30.
Around 1,000 flights have been canceled today and nearly 3,000 more delayed. Better than Tuesday, but still many travelers are being impacted. United, Southwest, and Alaska Airlines have the most canceled flights. Nashville, Buffalo, and Chicago Midway are the airports most heavily impacted.
That was Alex Stone as he is watching flight data for us. Although conditions are improving in the mid-state, dangerously cold temperatures are making travel difficult on the roads and in the skies. I'm John Michael with your latest news here. 25 degrees and still sunny on Music Road, but that could change very shortly. Talking about those flights that were canceled, Alaska and United are getting hit by a double whammy because their Boeing 737 MAX 9 planes are grounded as well. President Biden has summoned the 4 top leaders of Congress to the White House Wednesday, including House Speaker Mike Johnson, as a funding deadline looms. If Congress doesn't act by midnight Friday, funding will be out for programs under 4 of 12 bills. Programs under the other 8 bills, including defense spending, are set to run out for funds 2 weeks later. On February 2nd, Allie Bacorin has more.
The good news is the ball has already started rolling to try to kick the can down the road and buy Congress a little bit more time to work out longer-term funding solutions. The Senate voted last night, the first in a series of procedural steps, to extend the government funding deadline through March. But that actually still doesn't address the longer-term issues with government funding that have plagued this Congress for several months now.
Conservative members of Congress want more border security measures in any temporary spending deal. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm John Michael, WTN News.
It's a rock world after all. It's a rock world after all.
It sure is.
It's a rock world after all. It's a rock world.
Well, we got a lot of woke news to share with you here today. We're going to start with John, I'm reporting for duty, Kerry, who is, of course, the climate czar in the Biden administration these days. I mean, I saw a former Secretary Kerry, and I looked at him and said, John Kerry, why the long face? But then I just realized he has a very, very long face. So he's at Davos for the big environmental gathering, the World Economic Forum in Davos, where they all go to talk about how we're going to, stop global warming when it's minus 3 degrees here in Nashville. And says, look, we need to do this. We need to do better. He's out there making the case, for all the Green New Deal ideas. And, there's a reporter who, I don't know what you call this guy. He's an activist, probably better than a reporter, who decides he's going to dog the Kerry and talk him about uncomfortable things about why is it you come here to Davos and you preach to us about the need to change, the environment and quit burning carbon fuels, and you're flying on a big jet airplane when you could have taken a commercial aircraft and been much more efficiency about your use of carbon products, and it really tried to give him a hard time, and it was ugly.
What's the carbon footprint of these events every single year that you come here? You think it's worth it? Peasants pay for your crimes?
That's a stupid question.
Is it really? Is it more stupid than you traveling here to tell us? Please, sorry?
We're done. We are done now.
Don't grab me. You can't grab us. This is a free society, mate. We have freedom of the press. Why do you think you're more important? Your carbon footprint doesn't matter, but everybody else around the world
Suggested that. Nobody ever suggested that. Don't make up stupid questions.
You being here suggests that.
A stupid question.
You being here every single year and doing this suggests that.
And I have done a huge amount.
Listen, now it's finished, please.
Why can't I ask him questions?
Please.
Who are you? Why are you trying to bully me out of us?
No, so please.
That doesn't. A lot of people say no to a lot of the policies and agendas he pushes. They don't get a choice, so why can't we ask him a question in a public space? Can you not touch me?
Can you not touch me?
Can you not touch me?
He's trying to get a rise out of it, but I love Kerry. Well, it's a stupid question. Well, it's not a stupid question, and it's a very good question. He just doesn't want to answer it. I do a lot. Well, okay. So does that give you the right to not pay attention to one of these things where do as I say, not as I do? Of course, that's John Kerry all the way. He's got his own private jet. He and what they call Mama T, his wife, Mama Teresa Hines. Mama T, she likes to be called Mama T. But they got their own jets. They got big yachts that they hide from people. They fly all over the world, but you can't have warmth in your own home. You can't have natural gas. You can't have that. You can't have coal-fired electrical plants when it's cold. No, you can't have it. But I can have whatever I want because I'm John Kerry and I do a lot. I'm telling you, that guy. And here's a pretty interesting essay I found on Fox News. It's about John Kerry's staff. He pays his staff well over six figures, $186,680 a year. The median salary for people on his staff is $170,000 per year. That's right. He's stepping down, however, at the end of the year, or I guess any day now, to take over as in help with the campaign. And so the essay goes, no wonder John Kerry is stepping down as climate czar. Joe Biden's $1 trillion green agenda is blowing up, and no one is more closely tied to the fast-deflating boondoggle than John Kerry. The push for electric vehicles is a bust, as we've been talking. I mean, Have you seen the stories? I got them right here. I never pass up a good story about an EV. And it talks about how, during the snowstorms, the EVs were worthless. They wouldn't take a charge. They were just dead weight. Wouldn't go, couldn't take a charge. Batteries didn't last very long. Yes, I am so glad that we're moving toward electric vehicles. He says the push for electrical vehicles is a bust. Renewable projects like offshore wind farms are being canceled by the boatload. People are being tired of told they can't buy the things they want, like gas stoves and incandescent light bulbs. And guess what? Sane people in our country are willing to admit finally that the world still runs on fossil fuels and will do so for the foreseeable future. Even Wall Street elites are throwing in the towel. ESG funds, scorched by their high fees and avoidance of oil and gas stocks, are drying up. Just last week, Chesapeake Energy announced it will spend $7.4 billion to purchase Southwestern Energy, creating what will be our country's largest producer of natural gas. The combined companies will feed an ever-growing demand for U.S. gas to supply LNG support exports essential to loosening Russia's grip on Europe's energy. The acquisition signals confidence that Biden's crackdown on oil and natural gas production has run smack into a reality brick wall. Much as the White House wants to pander to the climate lobby, we need fossil fuels. FoxNews.com opinion piece. Very nice. The federal government is going to spend $700,000 on trans-inclusive sex ed for 14-year-olds, according to the Daily Wire. Department of Health and Human Services awarding nearly $700,000 of your hard-earned taxpayer dollars to back pregnancy prevention programs for young girls who identify as boys, warning that heteronormative sexual education is inadequate. Well, I've always said that. $698,000 grant, just about $700,000, which began in September of 2023, will continue through June of 27, will be allocated to the Centers for Innovative Public Health Research, a nonprofit that seeks to create inclusive teen pregnancy programs for transgender boys. Youth who are assigned female at birth are at risk for negative sexual health outcomes, yet are effectively excluded from sexual health programs because gender-diverse youth do not experience the cisgender, heteronormative teen sexual education messaging available to them as salient or applicable. So we have to have set up a separate program for, in most school districts, you might have one or two, if that. $700,000 of your taxpayer dollars going to pay for that stuff. Maine, meanwhile, is moving to create a sanctuary state for child sex change operations. Non-Mainers are welcome to contact the Judiciary Committee members as the bill affects everyone's parental rights. How would you like to be in Maine knowing that your tax dollars are going to pay for sex change operations for kids who are not from Maine? They're working on this now, a bill permitting minors to travel to the state to seek sex change and granting the state custody over children will move to the floor. Yeah, I love it how they call it gender-affirming health care. This is the thing that the left does. They like to come up with these words, these little word games. It's not mutilation. It's not sexual mutilation of young children. It's not even a sex change operation. It's gender affirming. We're affirming your gender. Many places are walking away. In Europe, they have decided that they went through this a long time ago in Europe and have now completely rejected it. Most of the countries are now saying, no, this is what you have in many cases are people, and I think there's a case to be made. I don't know what it is to be gay. I will never know what it is to be gay. I don't know. I'd have no idea what it's like to run through life and think that you may have been born a male, but now you really more identify as. I can't identify it. I know, and very few of us can. But for those who go through it, they often have found that there are underlying psychological issues, and maybe some parental involvement that leads them down that pathway. And in Europe, they're walking away from this stuff, and we're just rushing headlong right into it. And then here's one more story. How the Biden administration used a counterterrorism grant to fund anti-conservative propaganda. From the Daily Wire. The Department of Homeland Security paid an activist group $700,000 to create Homeland Security. $700,000 to create a self-described propaganda that attacked conservatives, a new investigation has found. DHS used grant programs intended to combat terrorists called the Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention Program to pay activists to write blog posts that criticized Donald Trump and other conservatives under the guise of media literacy, the Media Research Center has found through public records requests. In its funding application, the University of Rhode Island's Media Education Lab declared that propaganda and misinformation concerning topics including immigration and racial justice had become disruptive, in their opinion. It asked DHS for funding to run community-created counter-propaganda. That's an actual quote from what they asked when they made their request for the money. Propaganda can be used for socially beneficial purposes. Indeed, the public has long been recognized as being suggestible. The United States has long made use of beneficial propaganda during World War I, II, and the Cold War, the grant application said. This is too good. Again, from the Daily Wire, the finding positions at the University of Rhode Island's Media Education Lab and closely linked activist group Media Literacy Now, oh yeah, at the center of a sprawling government-funded campaign to run propaganda on Americans to create a mandate for increased censorship. MRC said the grant shows that Congress must abolish all domestic censorship programs. The Biden administration is able to get something quite special with its $700,000 grant, harnessing the Media Literacy Now network and ultimately paying children to advocate for media literacy mandates ensnares the whole of American public school system in its agenda. With just 2 grants, first from the State Department and now the Department of Homeland Security, the Biden administration has been able to artificially create a perpetual public demand for media literacy and public education, supercharging a censorship industry devoted to an inherently anti-American philosophy hidden beneath the asinine moniker of media literacy. The DHS grant led to an entity known as Courageous RI, Rhode Island. It was helmed by URI professor and leftist activist Renee Hobbs, which said that its program would use the funds to manipulate the public and policymakers. Manipulate. They admit that they're manipulating the public and policymakers into demanding policies to crack down on so-called what they determine in their infinite wisdom to be misinformation. Your tax dollars at work. $4.50 now on Super Talk. So happy to welcome a new client to our show today, the Restoration Wellness folks. That's the Restoration Wellness Med Spa. Let the team there help you achieve your weight loss goals for 2024. I'm going to be going through this, by the way. I haven't chosen to be involved in any of these kinds of programs before, but I can see now, after losing a little weight, and now it's starting to come back. Then I'm gonna get involved here, and I'll let you know how it goes as we go forward. Restoration Wellness is a leader in weight loss management in Wilson County, and they want to help you make 2024 the year that you achieve your weight goals. Call the Restoration Wellness team today at 615-470-8124 or visit them at their website, and here it is, restorationwellnessmedspa.com. to book a consult today. Best thing to do is to book a consultation. Go in and see my friends Carly and Jamie and hear about all the different kinds of approaches they have that can make you feel better. They will take good care of you and treat you like they're one of their own. Be a part of the 1,000 patients who have already seen life-changing results from the weight loss management program. They have customized treatment plans. They'll find something that works well for you. Restoration Wellness takes into consideration your unique needs, your lifestyle, and your goals. So whether your goal is to lose stubborn body fat or improve your overall health, Restoration Wellness has a solution for you. They have the newest technology in weight loss management. Here's the number again. Please write it down, 615-470-8124. RestorationWellnessMedSpa.com. Let me tell you about our good friends over at Stoltz Co. If you're in the market for a pole barn, the two brothers that run Stoltz Co. are two guys that you need to talk to. Exceptional quality craftsmanship and fair prices. They can build your new pole barn to your specifications with your needs in mind. That is the Stoltz Co. difference. Now, you can use pole barns for all kinds of things. It can function as a classic tool or work barn, a garage, or even a place to live. Flexibility is key. They combine the classic post-frame barn look with the reliability of modern materials and techniques to give you a finished barn that will stand the test of time. They don't scrimp on quality. They don't cut corners. They believe their customers deserve only the best. Just go to their website, stoltzco.com. Let me spell that for you. STOLTZCO, stoltzco.com. Take a look at some of the things they've done for other people, and I think you'll quickly understand what we're talking about. This isn't your grandpappy's pole barn. Then give them a call, 615-622-5992. Learn more at stoltzco.com. That's stoltzco.com.
It's 25 degrees on Music Row. I'm John Michael with your top stories. Senate Democrats are optimistic an immigration deal could be in sight after President Biden summoned the big four congressional leaders representing both parties to the White House to talk about a more than $100 billion supplemental aid package for Ukraine and Israel. After demands from Republicans, the legislation will likely include changes to U.S. immigration policy. ABC's Jay O'Brien has the latest.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer telling reporters he believes his chamber is in striking distance of a deal on legislation that includes funding for Ukraine, Israel, and changes to U.S. immigration policy.
I am really hopeful that negotiations are in the right direction. We are closer than we have ever been.
Schumer saying he's been working closely with the top Republican in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, on the legislation. The question facing Congress, will that spirit of bipartisanship extend to the Republican-controlled House, where this legislation would also have to pass?
Conservative lawmakers are pressing for more U.S. border concessions in any temporary spending deal. Right now in Tennessee, the maker of electricity for Tennessee and 7 other states says despite the bitter cold, the system is stable and generating facilities are doing well.
We've spent $123 million on upgrading to get ready for a system just like this.
TVA Scott Brooks on the Chris Hand Show. TVA wants customers to turn down the thermostat 2 or 3 degrees to help with the demand. They're the unsung heroes of the music business. The songwriters and some of the best live here in Nashville. Names behind dozens of hit songs are getting into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. Here's this year's inductees from ABC's Jason Nathanson.
Steely Dan members Donald Fagen and the late Walter Becker reeling in the accolades. Among the latest to get into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, the new names announced Wednesday. Joining them are the 4 founding members of R.E.M., sexy back songwriter Timbaland, country songwriter Hillary Lindsey, known for Jesus Take the Wheel and more, and Dean Pitchford, writer of classics including Footloose and Fame. They'll all be inducted in New York City in June.
This news was most likely music to the writer's ears. That's the latest news. Traffic and weather are next. I'm John Michael, WTN News.
Good evening. We'll call it evening. 5:06 on Super Talk 99.7. I'm Brian Wilson. You're listening to The Drive for this Wednesday, January 17th. I'm back in my studio. I wish I could say I enjoyed Iowa. I did enjoy covering the caucus. I did not enjoy the unbelievably cold weather.
Oh, come on.
Minus, the wind chill factor at one point was minus 33 degrees, I think. I mean, it's just unbelievably bad. And, it's one thing because, you're working hard, you're moving around your equipment, you're going from caucus you're going to the event to event to event, you're chasing around the candidates all over Iowa, and you're fighting the snow and the ice and the cold weather. I mean, it was a heavy lift, but, I think I got it out of my system. I don't think I need to do that again.
You're good, huh?
That was my 10th attempt at covering campaigns in some form or another, and I'm glad I got them under my belt. I'm glad to get a good sense of what's going on out there, but I don't think I need to do that again.
You let someone else handle it, huh?
That's right.
Yeah.
My old carcass is not up to the task anymore. Let's talk about, let's just go ahead and call it a 2024 update. We have so much news that we have to do it twice in a show because we can't get it all in one setting. There's a lot of stuff to talk about here with regard to the 2024 election. I'll do it a little differently this time. Washington State is now one of the many states that has rejected an attempt to try to block Trump from being on the ballot. There are 39 counties in that state, and a Washington State judge declined to take up the case, arguing it's this 14th Amendment argument that, it's just the Supreme Court's going to decide it, and that'll be the final decision. It'll probably be a unanimous decision from the High Court. And a lot of these state court judges are saying, I'm not going to put my good reputation on the line in something that's going to be overturned by the High Court. So they're, by one after another, they're just all dropping. There's only a few where the states have found there was any merit. And not really from a legal standpoint. They know there's no legal merit to this argument, that the 14th Amendment can be used, the insurrection clause, to keep Trump off the ballot. They know it has no legal merit. These are political decisions. The Supreme Court is going to slap the Supreme Court of Colorado back to the Stone Ages when this ruling comes out. I can't wait to read it. They're going to absolutely annihilate that argument, I believe. But here in Washington State, you got a very liberal state, by the way, one of the most liberal in the country. And the judge said, no, come You're kidding me, right? This argument? No, won't hold up. We've heard a lot about this 14th Amendment argument, and again, the Supreme Court will decide it, but an interesting story that I found, I don't often find them in Politico.com, but I thought this was interesting. The sleeping giant case that could upend Jack Smith's prosecution of Trump. Remember, Jack Smith is the one who wanted to find out about immunity. Does the President of the United States have immunity? And he asked the High Court to consider the case. But there's another case out there, one that people aren't paying much attention to, that could really have an impact on whether or not Jack Smith has a case to go after Donald Trump. Let me just read some of this. It's a little deep, but let me see if I can help you understand it. Here's the wrinkle. Immediately preceding this language is another provision. Okay, here we go. The Supreme Court has agreed to consider a case that doesn't mention the former president, but that could invalidate half of the January 6 charges against him. Here's the wrinkle. Immediately preceding this language is another provision of the SOX Act, which specifies that whoever corruptly alters, destroys, mutilates, or conceals records, documents, or other object with an intent to impair the object's integrity or availability for use in an official proceeding engages in a criminal act too. The Fisher argument is that the two provisions must be read together and that the phrase or otherwise obstructs in the broad part of the statute is confined by the narrow provision that came before it. Okay, under this reading, Smith would be required to prove that the defendants corruptly altered a record as a threshold matter before they can be charged more broadly with obstructing congressional proceedings. He could add charges that the same defendants otherwise engaged in similar forms of obstruction or documents. The argument goes, but the statute doesn't allow a standalone charge of obstruction of an official proceeding based on conduct such as trespassing on the Capitol building. The bottom line is, if this case is looked at and ruled in a certain way by the high court, it would essentially wipe out about half of the January 6th charges that are put against him by Jack Smith. So watch that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. Immunity. I mean, if you're paying attention, the 14th Amendment thing is not going to stand. The question of immunity is an open question. I don't know how the high court's going to rule on that, but there are other things that are being considered by the high court that could have some relevance with Jack Smith's case. We hear all the time from, the people on the left side of the equation that, we Republicans are a bunch of election deniers, that we brought lawsuit after lawsuit and nothing ever happened. And it's, you don't trust the system and you don't believe, the verdicts of these when the polls are counted. Listen to this. Former President Donald Trump won the Iowa caucuses on Monday, with Ron DeSantis claiming second place, Nikki Haley landing third. The general election is 12 months away, 10 months away on November 5th. However, if some organizations are already preparing for litigation post-election if Trump retakes the White House. There's a whole lot of, I'm trying to plow through a lot of stuff that before it gets to the point. Organizations such as Democracy Forward, which has taken the Trump administration to court over 100 times, says, we are preparing for litigation and preparing to use every tool in the toolbox that our democracy provides to provide the American people an ability to fight back should Trump win, said Sky Perryman, president of Democracy Forward. We believe this is an existential moment for American democracy, and it's incumbent on everybody to do their part. A coalition of public interest groups is looking to prevent Trump's plan by tying it up early in court cases if Trump gets reelected and try to expand his presidential powers. They're already getting ready to fight not only the results of the election, no matter what they're preparing. We'll have lawyers crawling all over this country trying to bring lawsuits on the left side. They just won't be able to. They talk about us being the election deniers. They talk about election denial every time they don't get something they like. They talk about, it wasn't a fair election. There were problems. I'm telling you, they cannot point their finger at Republicans and conservatives without taking a hard, cold look at their own activities. Joe Manchin says, would he get in as a independent candidate? He says, I'll make a decision. I'm sort of cutting through the chase here. I'll make a decision by March 5th, Super Tuesday. He said, after Super Tuesday, if it appears as though President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump will get the Democrat and Republican nominations, that will create decisions that need to be made. He talked about the no labels. Would he get on board with the no labels? He said, they've got to get on ballots in 34 states to be serious. And he says, here's the other thing. He says, I'm not going to be a spoiler. If there's a pathway forward, I've always been involved and competitive. I'm going to get involved. I would definitely want to win, and I'm going to fight to win. I will not go in there trying to harm or help somebody else. I want to make sure that we create a different option. Bringing people together any way I can to work Americans together is what I'm going to be doing. Joe Manchin, will he get in? I think he probably will. Let's see. Democrats apparently are worrying about the upcoming election. And they're worried that they see a flawed Biden campaign. From rollcall.com. Congressional Democrats have concern about President Joe Biden's reelection campaign, with some calling it for a new approach. Some veteran Democrats see a campaign that needs stronger leadership, more diversity, a stronger message, while they credit Biden for building what they call a successful first term. Democrat members say they are concerned about the campaign's ability to win over skeptical independents and frustrated Democrat voters. Listen, you do have a great number of Democrat voters who are frustrated right now. Black voters are saying they're going to sit on their hands, many of them. Hispanic voters not exactly clamoring to vote Democrat, believe it or not. Campaign ability to win over skeptical independents, that's a big deal as well, because you cannot win a national election when, what is that? I forgot, 37% of the country identifies as a Democrat, 37% identify as a Republican, and the rest, more than 40%, say they are independents. Independents are the largest voting bloc in America. Here's Representative Benny Thompson. I think those who helped Joe Biden get elected president are not real comfortable at this point with what we're seeing. It appears that the people who were engaged in helping craft the message and direction of the 2020 campaign are not actively involved in this campaign. Now, that doesn't mean it's not too late to broaden the participation, but I think part of the discomfort is in order to win, you have to have your best team effort. That team effort includes who he has, but also he needs men and women of color in the room. Latino, Asian, I think it's the tent is too small right now. That's interesting, isn't it? Trump, of course, won Iowa. Very, very strong turnout there. It was Ron DeSantis in second place. Ron DeSantis, by the way, is not even going to play essentially in New Hampshire. Most of his staff in New Hampshire has been pulled out, sent to South Carolina. He's going to make his last stand in South Carolina. Nikki Haley is going to make a big stand in New Hampshire to see if she can somehow get her numbers up to be competitive with Trump in New Hampshire. I'll talk more about that in a moment. And then she will go to South Carolina, her home state, and hope she can put together an organization. She should have a pretty good organization there, but Trump is leading by big numbers in South Carolina. So, by South Carolina, if Trump wins New Hampshire and then wins South Carolina, I mean, it's over, right? I mean, it's all just waiting for enough people to vote to put him over the delegate count, and that would probably come when we vote on Super Tuesday, March 5th. Numbers. From the Boston Globe, Trump 50, Haley 34, Ron DeSantis 5 in New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, Trump 50, Haley 34, so Trump leads her by 16 points. There is sort of an outlier poll out there. The American Research Group has it at a tie right now between Trump and Haley at 40%. So let's say DeSantis, he's only pulling 5% right now in New Hampshire. But if that went to that support, since he's all but pulling out, and that will be widely reported in New Hampshire, that went to Haley. I don't know. It's still a heavy. It could be a heavy lift unless this other poll is right. I don't know which one's right. I'll tell you what I think is probably about right. Real Clear Politics average has Trump leading by 13. So that's probably pretty close to being. By the way, the Iowa numbers, the poll, you say you don't believe polls? Polls are dead on in Iowa. Pretty much dead on. I mean, he was a little off. I mean, but well within the margin of error. Exactly what Trump got more than 50%. And, when you look at the polls, they were having Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis sort of neck and neck. And when you figure in the margin of error, that's about what happened. So there you go there. And so listen, I think probably what will happen is that Trump goes to New Hampshire. I mean, there's a scenario under which Haley could win there. She's a New Hampshire kind of Republican, whereas Trump not so much. And independents can play, and Democrats can play in the primary, and often do. Will enough of those people come in to try to mess with Trump that Nikki Haley wins in New Hampshire, and then she goes on to her home state in South Carolina? That's a thin read, but possible. Likely? No. Possible? Yes. So, look, one way or the other, by the time we get to South Carolina, we'll know. We'll know if anybody has a chance or if it's going to be Trump. I mean, the conventional wisdom is it's going to be Trump. And it's hard to argue against that when you look at some of the polls. But there is this thin read. The stars would have to align perfectly for Nikki Haley on some big questions. And these outlier polls would have to be not outlier polls, but accurate representations of what's going on there. It'll be interesting to see, but I think Trump wins New Hampshire, Trump wins South Carolina, and it's over, is the likely outcome. But there is one, I mean, you always, when you're playing this game, you always say, yeah, but is there a pathway? For DeSantis, I don't see it. I can see one tiny, narrow little pathway for Nikki Haley if everything goes well for her, if it goes perfectly for her in North Carolina, in New Hampshire, and then she can go to South Carolina and then try to, say, well, we did well in New Hampshire. This is my home state. Remember your old buddy Nikki? Maybe, but I mean, not likely. How's that for being a weasel on the numbers? 22 minutes now past the hour of 5 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. Eurofix has a very different business philosophy. They staff all their locations with more staff than the average auto repair shop so they can be ready when your emergency pops up out of nowhere. Have you noticed how hard it can be to get a right-now appointment for vehicle repair? Some dealers can be more than 2 weeks out just to get an appointment, but not at Eurofix. Eurofix has been offering quality repairs that beat the dealer without dealer pricing since 1999, plus a 3-year nationwide warranty and the staff to fix your car right now. If you're tired of waiting forever to get your car into the shop, call Eurofix. Owner Aaron Stokes says we will never be too busy for our customers. We're here to take their pain away and do it now. Eurofix repairs all European cars, and Eurofix says yes to speedy repair when others can't or just won't. Family owned for 24 years. Call this number, 844-EUROFIX, or visit myEurofix.com and tell them your friend and radio buddy Brian Wilson sent you.
It was a tough day for air travelers and investors. Those stories coming up at 5:30.
All right. We'll look for that news here in a minute. You know, people who had electric cars who had to deal with the very brutal temperatures that we've gone through with all this winter weather have found that they did not do very well. From DNYUZ, the news.com. With Chicago temperature sinking below zero, electric vehicle charging stations have become scenes of desperation. Depleted batteries, confrontational drivers, and lines stretching out into the street. When it's cold like this, cars aren't functioning well, chargers aren't functioning well, and the people don't function so well either. Said Javid Spencer, an Uber driver, who said he had done little else in the last 3 days besides charge his rented Chevy Bolt and worry about getting stranded with a dead battery again. Said he set out on Sunday for a charging station, had 30 minutes left on his battery, but within minutes the battery was dead and he had to have the car towed to the station. When I finally plugged it in, it wasn't getting any charge. Recharging the battery, which normally takes about an hour, in the cold weather took Mr. Spencer 5 hours. More snaps like this have created headaches. I mean, if you got it in your nice warm garage and you're charging it up there, and then you're going to drive, some distance to work or back. But if you're trying to go anywhere, and you need to understand these electric vehicles, the batteries, when it's really, really cold, they get zapped. You're not going anywhere. You're not going to go very far. And the wind chills plummeted to near minus 30 across the Chicago area. Vehicles, so here's a quote. It's kind of like I don't really want a Tesla. People who are trying to get their Teslas charged. Again, I hear from people that say, I have an EV. I love it. It's the great thing. But I mean, I can't imagine. It took me 11 hours to drive from Des Moines, Iowa to Nashville in cold weather. I mean, can you imagine trying to do that? I mean, it was something I needed to do. I needed to get from point A to point B. I needed to get there reliably, and I knew it was going to be cold. My Ford F-150 performed perfectly. Can you imagine trying to do something like that in an electric vehicle where you're having to stop with charging stations every 30 minutes?
It would have taken you 2 days, probably.
It would have been a 2-day ordeal. I doubt if I ever would have gotten here. I think I would have been so frustrated. I would have been like that guy who just pulled over and said, I got to rent another car because this is not working. There are so many problems with these EVs. But again, we think, we got to go. Everybody needs to have an electric vehicle, says the Biden administration. Now, honestly, it may work for some people and some places, and that's great. Knock yourself out. If you have a scenario where it works for you, but if you got to go somewhere and you got to go whether it's cold or whether it's not, whether it's hot or whether it's not, because they also have problems when it gets really hot, I don't know how you could rely on them. 1,000% reliability? No, you're not going to have it. Now, gas cars break down too, but not as often as you would have problems running out of a charge when you needed a charge and you needed to get somewhere. So I think a lot of people are, when you see stories like this, it makes them stop and rethink, whether or not they're ever going to move toward an electric car. 30 minutes now past the hour.
It's 24 degrees on Music Row. I'm John Michael with your top stories. Get ready. Again, round 2 of winter weather is headed to the mid-state of Tennessee. Alex Stone is watching the skies for us.
Around 1,000 flights have been canceled today and nearly 3,000 more delayed. Better than Tuesday, but still many travelers are being impacted. United, Southwest, and Alaska Airlines have the most canceled flights. Nashville, Buffalo, and Chicago Midway are the airports most heavily impacted.
Air carriers are cautioning that it will take a while to get back on schedule as the weather woes continue. For the latest from Wall Street, here's Daria Albinger.
From ABC News, Wall Street now. Stocks fell again, but they closed off their session lows. The Dow gave up 94 points, off 0.25%. The Nasdaq tumbled 89. The S&P closed down 27, both indices losing more than 0.5%. Rising yields in the bond market again putting downward pressure on stocks. We stepped up our spending in December, closing out the holiday shopping season and the year with some gains. Retail sales rose 0.6% last month. It's another clear sign that consumers are confident enough to keep spending freely despite other economic worries. Consumer spending accounts for almost 3/4 of the U.S. economy. As promised, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is proposing new rules that would lower overdraft fees from the current average of $26. In other words, if you overdraw your account on a $3 cup of coffee with the fee, that coffee is now almost $30. The nation's largest banks are expected to push back.
That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm John Michael, WTN News.
Grace Point Healthcare delivers medicine affordably with the menu-style transparent pricing, so you will know how much it costs before the care is delivered. Smart Care plans start at just $69 a month. You get unlimited office visits and free basic labs for an entire year. And because they treat the entire family, even newborns, they offer family plans. I stepped outside. My mouth is cold. Sorry. In conjunction with high deductible insurance plans, this will save you and your family hundreds of dollars. And at Grace Point, you take their time with each patient. They see you the same or next day. There are no long wait times or crowded wait rooms, and they treat naturally whenever possible. It is a military vet-owned practice. Some of the reasons why it's been voted the best primary care provider by Toast of Music City year after year after year. And Grace Point Healthcare on Main Street in Franklin, they want you to know they believe strongly in freedom of choice when it comes to vaccines for you and your children. Call this number, 599-6868, to schedule a visit. Yeah, this one is going to stir up a conversation, I think. It has to do about the difference in the sexes between men and women. And I've just got to go ahead and say, let's open up the phone lines at 615-737-9986. And if you have something you'd like to add to this conversation, if you would like to disabuse me of this notion, you think that this story I'm about to share with you is a bunch of hooey, well, you can jump right in. So listen to this. Here we go. Here's the premise. Men really are better with directions than women, a study finds, and the reason may surprise you. From thedailymail.com, men are said to be better with directions than women, and a new study claims to uncover the source of their skills. While theories have suggested the ability stems from evolution, researchers at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign determined it comes down to how different genders are raised. The team found that boys are more encouraged to play outside more than girls, allowing them to be exposed to outside surroundings and enhancing their navigational skills. Researchers previously thought that evolution might have played a major role because historically men would travel further from their home than women to provide for their families. However, researchers noted if that were the case, the genetic trait would have been passed down to female children. It's pretty obvious to me that the human sex difference is a result of culture, not evolution, says Justin Rhodes, a professor at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and co-author of the study. The trend for males to display slightly better performance than females in animals, independent of sex differences in home range, is mostly the side effect of sex hormones. They're caused by they're off into the weeds here. They looked at the animal world as well, and then they looked at other things. But let me get back to the main thing here. They looked at the species' home range measurements, see how far the genders travel from their base, primarily through observation and radio tracking or trapping. And the ultimate thing here that they came up with is because of the idea that boys go out into the world to play more than little girls do, that they learn more about how to navigate the world around them. And they actually had some pretty sophisticated ideas of coming up with this example. But I mean, I'm wondering, which is true in your life. I mean, in your family, is the man the better navigator than the woman? Or is the woman the better navigator? Or does it really, honestly, for me, it doesn't matter anymore because I don't think about navigation anymore. I use the GPS. But back in the day when there used to be a thing called maps, old paper maps, I learned very quickly if I handed the map to my partner, who happened to be female, and I say, here, tell me which way I need to go, keep me on the straight and narrow, I would invariably end up getting completely lost.
Go this way.
The ability to read a map and to navigate was not something that I found that women do very well. Now, again, there are exceptions to every rule, and I'm not trying to cast too wide a net here, but we're talking writ large here. Is it your experience out there that the men are the better navigators or the women are the better navigators? I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. 615-737-9986. Okay, Chris, your experience in this regard.
I can say this, and without fear of upsetting anyone, my wife would get lost in her own home. That's how bad she is with directions. She is awful. There's no way she could get anywhere without a navigation, a phone, or something telling her where to go. Like, even if it's somewhere that she lives, she still needs directions. She's just not good at finding her own way at all. Yeah, but I'm on the other hand, I've always found that I was pretty good at it. I could always, even if I didn't know where I was going exactly, I knew the general direction in which I needed to be going. I could eventually get there. I just somehow have that kind of built-in compass, I guess.
I wonder whether or not it's true anymore that men are maybe losing that skill. I mean, again, I put in an address on GPS, and I mean, I was coming back home from Iowa yesterday, and I'm driving back, and I got to thinking about halfway. I don't even know what state I'm in right now. I mean, am I in Illinois? Am I in Indiana? Am I still in Iowa? Have I gotten into Kentucky? I mean, I had no idea where I was, and I got to, why don't I know where I'm at? He said, ending the sentence in a preposition. I didn't know where I was. Excuse me, because I was just trusting the GPS to tell me where to go. I mean, you sort of turn off, you stop thinking about it. And I wonder if we're going to lose that ability over time. I mean, whatever happened, if all the GPS went down, we'd be screwed.
Yeah, I definitely think you're right about that. People don't think anymore. And I've actually done that myself. I've been in a car where I knew I wasn't even using navigation. It's a route that I've been on many, many times, but I was deep in a conversation, was not paying attention. I was just keeping it between the lines and completely missed an exit and didn't realize it for like 15 minutes.
I know. It's because you just get lost and you're used to, having the GPS do the work for you. Yep. Well, I don't know. Listen, I think when I was younger, I remember when growing up in my hometown, I really navigated by landmarks. I mean, if you asked me what the street was called, I couldn't tell you what the street was. But if I knew if you went down to the water tower and you turned left and you then took another right, you would get to the airport. And so, if you asked me what the street names were, I couldn't tell you, but I could tell you how to get there. And I think over years when I was, when we used to use atlases and maps, and every car had a big fold-out map that you had to pull out, and you had, if you needed to go somewhere, you had to actually look at it ahead of time and do it. But now, I don't think we do that as much. But I think generally with the female partners that I've had in my life, people that I've dated, I would say that generally speaking, the men were the better navigators than the women. And now that's not to say there aren't exceptions. And again, I don't want to cast too wide a net or be a sexist about it, but I think this is probably something. And again, the study says it's because of the way men are raised. They're raised to get out, to be outdoors more than young girls are. And that's where they sort of inherently learn it. It's not something that gets passed down genetically. It's something more that you pick up by the way you were raised. Let's go to the phone lines now and see what people think about this. Stephen in Lebanon, you're on with Brian on the drive. Hello, Stephen. So tell me, does this
Brian.
ring true to you and your house?
Well, I mean, it all depends. My experience has been it depends on who it is you're talking to, whether or not they're going to be a good navigator for you. I've had, men like my dad. He taught me how to read an atlas map growing up. And my mom was, getting directions where I used to live in Memphis. I could talk to mom or my dad, and they would tell me exactly how to get to where I needed to get to, even draw me a little map of it. But then I've had experiences where I've asked a lady, how do you get here? And she couldn't tell me one way or the other. But then again, I've had people like my father-in-law. I asked him where to get somewhere, and he's like, well, you take this road north, and then you go on this road, and you take that road east. And I'm like, no, I don't know north and east and all that. Tell me left or right, crap right. Like that. So, really it all depends on the person that you're trying to get directions from or who's navigating for you and the way that they were really raised or taught.
All right, Stephen, thank you very much. I want to get some women in here to defend themselves Gertrude in Sumner County. Gertrude, am I being hopelessly sexist, or do you think there's something to this?
No, I don't think so. I'm like the guy you just talked to who said I've seen males who couldn't tell you right from left, and I've seen females who couldn't tell you. I have always been able to read a map simply because I was interested in it. As a kid, the first time I got a map, I thought, oh my gosh, this is so neat. I just taught myself how to read it. No one ever taught me how to read a map. And down through the years, whenever we're such world travelers, but whenever we would take a trip, I was always the navigator. And even after I have GPS and started using GPS, I still like to look at the map to get my bearings before I trust the GPS, because sometimes the GPS will send you to Never Never Land.
Right.
And there have been times that I knew it was giving me the wrong directions because I had looked at the map.
At the map ahead of time, right. Well, listen, I think that's a good point. My mom was a great navigator all of her life, and then one day she had sort of I don't know, I call it a brain fart. It wasn't a TIA, but it was something, a mini stroke. And you know what? She never lost her ability to remember things. She could talk about things that happened 50 years ago, things that happened 10 minutes ago, sharp as a tack. But after that brain event, whatever it turned out to be, she lost the ability to navigate. It was the weirdest thing. She'd get lost going to the mailbox. And she couldn't drive anywhere. Not because she wasn't capable of driving, because she said, my instinct, if I say go left, it's almost invariably I went the wrong direction. She couldn't find her way to the beauty shop or the grocery store or anything, and then she had to stop driving because of it. So, I mean, there is a part of your brain where this ability lies, I think. Let's get Heather from Lewisburg on the line. I don't want to be accused of not giving women an equal opportunity to defend themselves here. Heather, what do you think?
Hi. So I'm a little young for the maps, but my mom was always the one that did the guidance in the car, always. She actually hated when anyone else did it. But it's been about 50-50 for the people in my life. I would attribute that to education. But one of the things I thought maybe would be a huge attribute or a huge thing that would affect it would be, one, your job experience. I'm a delivery driver. Where I live, I could go pretty much anywhere and know where I'm at. But a major factor is internet. If you grow up with internet sources and whatnot, you're more likely to maybe know where to go, but you could also be reliant on GPS. But nowadays, I just feel like everybody is reliant on GPS, even some of the older folks that I have run into.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's going to be a lost art. Somebody who can read a map, it's going to be a what? Well, it's in the same way. Remember when MapQuest came out and we all got on MapQuest if we needed to go somewhere? Nobody goes to MapQuest anymore.
You'd print out the directions.
That's right. That's right. All right, Eric and Jasper, real quick, you're on with Brian on the drive. What do you think?
Give you a little background. I'm a retired military. I spent 20 years in Special Forces, but my first deployment with the military back in the 80s was with the 1st Armored Division. We were taught in basic how to read maps. They do not teach that anymore. It's all GPS, all electronics.
Yep.
I'm trying to teach my son. He's 20. He's never been in the military, but he's 23 years old. Doesn't know how to read a map. I'm teaching him how to use a map. I'm a truck driver. Now, granted, where I go to now is back and forth the same place all the time, so I've got it in my head. But I always carry my map book with me because I don't rely upon GPS. Like the young, I think it was Gertrude who said, GPS will put you where you don't want to be, especially in an 18-wheeler.
Yeah, you're absolutely. Go ahead. Now,
like I said, but nowadays we don't even teach how to use a map, how to read a map. I mean, it's really getting bad because if something were to happen, these kids nowadays will go, "Uh-oh, get a GPS. GPS doesn't work."
What am I going to do? I still have a national map atlas in my car. I still have one, and because you know what I like sometimes is to look at it and go, the GPS just gives me too narrow a view. I need a larger view of my trip. sometimes to sort of wrap my head around about how far I'm going and whether or not the route that they have proposed is the right route or not. But I honestly, I got to tell you, I got on the road in Des Moines. I punched in the home button, and it said it would take me 11 hours to get there. And I rolled in within 2 minutes of the original time it estimated it would take me to make the trip. And that's stopping for gas a couple of times. So I think that it is a lost art. And I think that the young people, they don't know how to do cursive writing. They don't know how to read maps, and they don't know how to read a clock. And I think all of those things, if we ever lose, the things that we've come to rely upon for one reason or another, the world's going to be in a big mess because these kids don't have any understanding of how to actually get around. It's interesting. But again, I don't know if this survey is right or not, but it certainly sort of jives with at least my personal experience. But there are always exceptions to every rule, right? It's 52 minutes now past the hour of 5 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. I had no problem getting over to Nashville Golden Coin, where I had my meeting there, and I brought in a bunch of old coins. Found out I had $1,500 worth of coins there. It was amazing. Folks, I want to talk to you about gold, though, today, which has been used as money for millennia, a tried and true store of value, consistent across generations. The thing about gold and other precious metals is they are tangible. They are real. You can hold them in your hand. You can feel them. You can put them in your safe, and they always will have value. So are you interested in knowing more about this? Because inflation is currently decreasing the value of your money. And gold and silver can be a safe haven during uncertain economic times. You can learn all about the importance of owning precious metals by going to Nashville Golden Coin. Maybe you have gold that was given to you and you're not sure what it was worth, or you're curious about precious metals in general and want to learn more. This is the place to check in. Always available to discuss your options, educate you on the precious metals market. So do what I did. Go to Nashville's real money source, Nashville Golden Coin. That's NashvilleGoldenCoin.com to set up your one-on-one appointment.
It's 24 degrees at 6:01. I'm John Michael with your top stories. Another round of wintry weather and single-digit temperatures are on the way for the weekend. The forecast and the latest traffic report are upcoming. With more money for Israel and Ukraine on the line, President Biden summons congressional leaders to the White House for talks on an aid package. After it was over, House Speaker Mike Johnson and his party wouldn't budge from its demand for stricter border measures. ABC News national correspondent Stephen Portnoy reports.
Emerging from the meeting, the House Speaker said he told the president,
"We must have change at the border, substantive policy change."
Mike Johnson says Republicans will continue to insist on stricter measures than Democrats have been willing to accept.
The legislation has to solve the problem.
Top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer says he sees progress in the bipartisan border negotiations, and he urges House Republicans to accept a compromise.
Any party that says do it my way or no way, we're not going to get anything done.
One side effect of a shutdown, it could delay getting those Boeing jets back in the skies that were grounded after an exit door came off in mid-flight. Experts are stumped as to why a certain cancer is rising dramatically among people in their 30s and 40s.
Back in the 1990s, colorectal cancer was the fourth leading cause of death of men and women with cancer. But now it's number 2 in women and number 1 in men.
That was the American Cancer Society's chief science officer, Dr. William DeHutt. A stabbing spree in New York City leads to a citywide manhunt. Police say there have been multiple stabbings over the past several days in Queens and another subway attack in Brooklyn possibly connected. NYPD Chief Patrol John Schell says today that investigators believe each assault was committed by the same person and the victims are expected to survive.
We have an unidentified individual who's walking around the street, randomly stabbing people with a hunting knife. There is no connection to the individuals, and it seems to be unprovoked.
The NYPD has captured surveillance video of the suspect. They are distributing that, looking for leads. New polling has Donald Trump as the favorite for the New Hampshire GOP primary. Nikki Haley trails Trump by 16%, and Ron DeSantis is a distant third, with just 5% of Republican voters supporting him. That's the latest news. Weather and traffic are next. I'm John Michael, WTN News.
It is 8 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. I'm Brian Wilson, your friend and radio buddy, and you're listening to The Drive. We are got one more hour to go on this Wednesday. Still pretty chilly, 24 degrees, but you give it a week, and we're going to be in the 60s.
It's just insanity, man.
That is insane. That is insane. That's just a... I don't think it's good for the human body to go from really, really cold to really warm to back to cold again. I don't think.
Yeah, probably going to be a lot of sickness after that.
I think it really does have an impact on you. So anyway, if we can hold out, I mean, this weekend, I don't think the temperatures are ever going to get above freezing.
If they do, it'll be just barely.
Yeah, it's just by a hair, and so you just need to understand this is a time. But I mean. I'm shocked and I shouldn't be. I'm shocked and surprised. I got all the way to Iowa and back in my Ford F-150. And, and it was, at times, it was a little dicey, I'll be honest with you. There was a time when I was on the road and it was whiteout conditions. I couldn't see beyond the end of my hood. And I know it was bad for a lot of other people because I saw the remains of wreck after wreck after wreck after wreck when I drove out of Iowa yesterday to come back. I mean, I'm not joking. 300, 400 semi-trucks in the ditch. It was just unbelievable how many semis ran off the road on the interstate up there during the blizzard. And they're going to be, I think, weeks and months probably getting all of those trucks back up on their wheels and out of there. And, I mean, the untold millions of dollars worth of damage. So, I mean, I know it was rough, but I got all the way up there and I got all the way back. I hit Tennessee, and it's shocking how uneven the plowing was. I mean, some places it was pretty good, and then, boy, you'd be driving along doing about what looked like completely dry pavement. You'd be doing about 60, 70 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden you're in ice and snow, and you got to, whoa, I need to slow down here a bit, and it would just come up on you so quick.
Mm-hmm.
Very uneven. And then here in Watertown today, we got, just before the show, about 2 o'clock, I got a call from the Amazon driver. We can't get to your house. Well, I've been getting to my house just fine. Why can't you drive your big old rammed van up here and deliver the box? Well, they just didn't want to get out and trump around in the snow. So they would go to, they went down to the gas station, grocery store, deli, and they would park in the parking lot, and they called everybody and said, if you want your package, come get it.
Yeah, apparently that's happening in other areas around town, too.
Yeah.
Pulling up at a parking lot and say, if you want your stuff, come get it.
Otherwise, we're gonna sit here and stay warm. We're not gonna trounce around in the snow. Well, listen, if I can get all the way to Iowa and back, you can make it up, my street to my house. I mean, it's not like it's 15 inches deep. It's just packed snow.
Yeah.
And if you aren't prepared for that, I mean, I guess I'm lucky because I have 4-wheel drive, but I mean, if your business is deliver stuff, you ought to be able to deliver stuff. And you ought to have the equipment you need to do it. I don't know. It's just, a bunch of wimpy Amazon drivers. That's right. I said you're wimpy. Snow wimps. All right. I got a lot of stuff to try to cover here. Some of it new, so bear with me. First, I want to get this in. Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense. The whole story. He went to the hospital, and they didn't know where he was for a week. And the president didn't even know he was in the hospital. And, bless heart, he's got prostate cancer, and he's had some complications, apparently. That's what we know. But the real issue was, why didn't he tell anybody that he was in the hospital? I mean, even his deputy didn't know that he was there. She was off in the Caribbean on vacation. And then number 2 at the Defense Department was on vacation and didn't even know. I mean, that Lloyd Austin was apparently incapacitated in the hospital and had to have an emergency trip to the hospital after something went wrong with his original prostate surgery. And we now know that apparently they were trying to do everything on the down low from the very beginning. Because when he called for the ambulance, this is what his assistant called on his behalf. It must be nice to have people who can do your 911 calling for you. Called on his behalf and made a request of the 911 operator.
Can I ask, can the ambulance not show up with lights and sirens? We're trying to remain a little subtle.
See, they were thinking that way from the very beginning. And I think that's sort of an interesting observation, don't you? That we got that 911 call. Now, big major standoff has been going for some time now in Washington between the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and the Republicans in the Senate, who seem to be saying, you've got to do something, Mr. President, about the border situation. And we're not going to talk about any budget deal. We're not going to talk about money for Ukraine. We're not going to talk about any money for Israel. We're not going to talk about any money for Taiwan until you do something to fix the border. All right? You got to fix it. And so the House passed this bill, H.R. 2, which was their idea about what they wanted, sort of their marker in that whole process. And today, the Speaker of the House, the Majority Leader of the Senate, and who else? Who else was there? I forget. Oh, yeah, the Speaker, the Minority Leader of the House, Hakeem Jeffries, and I would imagine Mitch McConnell was there as well, all ended up at the White House for a big meeting with Biden to see if they could sort of come up with some solution to the impasse. Now, I've seen several stories here, and it depends on, I guess how you want to look at it, but let me go through what happened. Johnson, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, according to the Washington Times, emerged from the White House after a meeting Wednesday and rejected President Biden's bid for some concession on border policy in exchange for more war aid to Ukraine. Mr. Johnson said the deal being cooked up in the Senate doesn't go far enough to end the chaos at the border. We are insistent, he said, that the elements have to be meaningful. The House is ready to act, but the legislation has to solve the problem, and that's the critical point. This is Johnson speaking to reporters on the Northwest Drive of the White House. Mr. Johnson met with the president and other House and Senate leaders to discuss Mr. Biden's long-stalled $110 billion emergency request for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. The package includes money to help process the flood of illegal immigrants at the border, which opened the door to Republican demands for tougher border policy. The Democrats, we'll spend some money on the border. We want more money to actually, process them and bring them in quicker. And the Republicans are saying, no, absolutely not. Mr. Johnson argued the border must be the top priority for Mr. Biden and Congress. We understand there is a concern about the safety, security, and sovereignty of Ukraine, but the American people have those same concerns about our domestic sovereignty, our safety, and our security. Wow. I love that. That's exactly what he needs to be saying. House Majority Leader Charles Schumer, Chucky, painted a much rosier picture when he exited the White House, saying the meeting was good and positive. Mr. Schumer said the president was willing to make compromises on the border, but Ukraine must be a priority in any deal. There was a tremendous focus on Ukraine and understanding that if we don't come to Ukraine's aid, the consequences around the globe would be nothing short of devastating. The roughly $60 billion for Ukraine in the package also met resistance from House Republicans, who questioned how the money is being spent. The U.S. has already given $75 billion to Ukraine since the Russian invasion in February of 2022, and there have been all kinds of reports, you've heard me talk about them, where we don't know how that money was spent. So we need more accountability if we're going to do that, and I understand it's a very controversial thing. So here's another story, a slightly different take from the Washington Examiner. Congressional leaders from both parties voiced optimism Wednesday about reaching a deal on Ukraine aid and securing the southern border. Biden met with Johnson, Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, Mitch McConnell, a host of other lawmakers on Wednesday, as negotiators try to continue to reach a deal on Biden's supplemental request. Johnson and Schumer delivered statements to reporters following the meeting, with Schumer estimating the chances of keeping the government open and the president's supplemental request is being passed as a little greater than 50%. Johnson, and this is their take on it, in particular appeared to slightly soften his position that Democrats get on board with H.R. 2, the immigration bill that the House passed in 2023, in order for Republicans to sign off on another tranche of Ukraine aid, but stressed Biden must still enact substantive policy changes regarding the border. Here's the direct quote. We're not insistent upon a particular name of a piece of legislation, but we are insistent that the elements have to be meaningful. The House is ready to act, but the legislation has to solve the problem. And that's the critical point. Johnson added Republicans understand the necessity about Ukraine, but reiterated that border must be the top priority. I think he's right about that. The only way we will do border and Ukraine, or even either one of them, is bipartisan. You cannot do things with one party in a divided Congress, so anyone who says, any party that says, do it my way or no way, they're not going to get anything done, said Schumer. Well, listen, they want a budget deal, and they want money for Ukraine, and they want money for Israel, and they want money for Taiwan. And what everybody is saying is, the Republicans are saying, but you've got to fix this nightmare situation at the border. Listen, Johnson will not be Speaker very long if he gives up if he blinks on this. He needs to understand that. And I'm not big on a bunch of chaos and finding a new speaker and vacating the chair and all that nonsense. I mean, we are barely hanging on to a majority because of that nonsense that Matt Gaetz all started. I'm not a big fan of Matt Gaetz. I used to like him quite a bit, but I don't anymore. That was personal. It was bitter, and it did not strengthen the Republican Party. It weakened it. The only thing is, I like Mike Johnson. I think he's a pretty good speaker, and I think he's been negotiating pretty well. But he cannot blink on this. He absolutely cannot blink. If he blinks and he gives in on this, I promise you he won't be the speaker another week. And he knows it. And I'm pretty sure that he went into that meeting and said, look, I'm telling you right now, I can't sell this on the House side. I can't get you the votes you need. And so you're going to have to do better. And so he needs to stand his ground. They say, well, he's only 1/3. He's only 1/2 of 1/3 of the government. And I say, well, you know what? That's the way it works in divided government. If you want something out of the House of Representatives, you have to listen to them. As long as they stand their ground, something might happen. The moment they blink, then you just can't get rolled on this one. You just can't. This is too important, and it means too much to the American people. What did we hear in all of the polls that came out of Iowa? The number one concern of voters in Iowa was immigration. And the way Trump has handled this until now has been just reprehensible. This is the one opportunity we have to get some modicum of change on the border. And they absolutely must stand their ground. Absolutely do not blink on this one. More stuff from the swamp. Right now, 21 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock on Super Talk. Well, the cold weather, man, it's here. There's no doubt about it. And if you're having a problem with your heating system, call the people I would call immediately. Just dial this number, 615-775-7833. That's the number to Busy Bee HVAC and Plumbing. Maybe you got a problem with your plumbing. I mean, frozen pipes. I read today Dan Mandis had a frozen pipe problem. Well, I know who he called, 615-775-7833. Busy Bee is your heating, cooling, your official Rude Pro partner. Listen, the way you avoid having problems emerge at all is to become a member of the Beehive Club. Being a member starts for as little as $99, and for that you get 3 thorough maintenance services on your systems. 1 aimed at heating, 1 aimed at cooling, 1 aimed at plumbing. No overtime charges 24/7, 10% off all repairs. Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling is your official Rude Pro partner. For satisfaction guaranteed, call Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling, 615-775-7833, online at busybeehvac.com.
Some snow may have melted, but there's more on the way. We'll explain, and we'll have today's closing money news. That's all coming up at 6:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
It's 27 minutes now past the hour of 6 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. The Speaker of the House is now making an appearance on cable news, and he seems to be standing by and we're not budging. We got to have some change on the border. But I do feel like that they understand that they feel like collectively that there is a need to provide Ukraine with more funding. But the Speaker just said, I'm paraphrasing here, when Zelensky was here, he told me that, that he wasn't getting the stuff that had already been approved, that he wasn't getting it. It wasn't arriving. And so he said, we have really some big questions about, well, why are you asking for more money when the stuff that we already authorized you to send hasn't arrived in Ukraine? Why hasn't Ukraine gotten the tools they need to win the war and push back Russia adventurism? So I think he's standing his ground, and I certainly hope he does, because I'm telling you, the border thing, oh my gosh. Don't get me started. I can go for an hour on that. Other news. Today there was a big case argued before the Supreme Court, and it's a complicated case, and I'm not sure I can explain it in simple terms because it's not that simple. But what it is it really gets down to the question of whether or not the federal bureaucracy, the administrative state, basically the executive branch, can willy-nilly change the way that laws are interpreted with the passing of each president. So one president comes in and he looks at it this way. One president comes in and looks at it another way. And when there are what the agencies consider to be vagaries in the law that has been passed by Congress, signed into law by a president, when it was a bill, it became a law, and that law stands, and they say, well, it's very vague. How do we implement this? We're going to set up our own rules. And they do it through executive order and through rulemaking and through setting all kinds of regulations. And has the administrative state become too powerful is the real question. From the Washington Examiner, conservative Supreme Court majority leans into diminishing agency power. Thank the good Lord. I hope this happens. A decades-old Supreme Court, this would help to clean the swamp in a big way. A decades-old Supreme Court precedent, seen by critics as giving too much power to federal agencies, was highly scrutinized on Wednesday by members of the High Court's conservative-appointed majority. Arguments in two separate hearings on Wednesday surrounded appeals filed by two fishing companies of lower court rulings that allowed the National Marine Fisheries Service to force commercial fishermen to help pay for at-sea human monitors to be on board their vessels and keep track of the number of herring that they caught. The companies argue that Congress never authorized the agency, which is part of the Commerce Department, to establish such a program. The majority of the 9 justices, 6 of whom were appointed by Republican presidents, appeared critical of the 40-year-old precedent known as the Chevron Doctrine, which states that if a federal rule is challenged in court, the court should defer to the agency and its reasonable interpretation of the congressional statute it says grants them permission to create a rule. At least one conservative justice appeared skeptical of completely overruling the doctrine. All 3 Democrat-appointed justices appeared certain about preserving the document's deference to the expertise of the agencies. I'm sorry. No, I haven't raspberried in a long time, but that's a raspberry-worthy statement. To the expertise of the agencies, if a statute is written ambiguously. See, that's the thing. What is ambiguous? I think this is ambiguous. May not be ambiguous at all. May thwart the true will of Congress, but they still have the power to do it through the Chevron Doctrine. The Supreme Court could also take on alternative approaches that would place additional limits on when lower court judges can defer to agencies without necessarily overturning Chevron. One of the most staunch skeptics of Chevron on display was Justice Neil Gorsuch, who was appointed by Donald Trump, mentioned that the doctrine created confusion in lower courts and said it even prompted circuit judges to write letters asking the high court to overturn the precedent. Even in a case involving herring fishermen and the question of whether they have to pay for government officials to be on board their boats, lower court judges, even here in this rather prosaic case, can't figure out what Chevron means. Gorsuch told Elizabeth Prelogar, a U.S. Solicitor General. The U.S. Solicitor General argues on the part of the government. Brett Kavanaugh, another appointee of Trump, highlighted how Chevron is often a catalyst for instability by allowing new presidential administrations to define laws in different ways than previous administrations. It is the role of the judiciary under the Constitution to police the line between the legislature and the executive to make sure that the executive is not operating as a king, Kavanaugh said. John Roberts focused on the High Court's lack of a reliance on Chevron, wondering whether it had been overruled in practice. Arguing on behalf of the Justice Department, which opposes overriding Chevron, Prelogar said the High Court could affirm that lower court judges should run through other tools of interpretation before deciding if a statute is ambiguous. She's giving them a halfway out. Keep an eye on this one. 33 past the hour now.
At 6:30, and a chance for more snow is in the forecast for tomorrow evening. Although some of the recent snow has melted, conditions are still dangerous for drivers around the Music City. The full weather forecast is coming up, and the latest traffic report upcoming as well. It may be cold here in Nashville, but in upstate New York, it's downright deadly, and that's prompting a full travel ban.
This will keep people and their families safe. But it also keeps streets clear of traffic so we can do the work that we need to do to open up roads and to get back to normal as quickly as possible.
That's Buffalo Mayor Byron Brown. It was a tough day on Wall Street. Daria Albinger has our closing report.
From ABC News, Wall Street now. Stocks fell again, but they closed off their session lows. The Dow gave up 94 points, off 0.25%. The Nasdaq tumbled 89. The S&P closed down 27, both indices losing more than 0.5%. Rising yields in the bond market again putting downward pressure on stocks. We stepped up our spending in December, closing out the holiday shopping season and the year with some gains. Retail sales rose 0.6% last month. It's another clear sign that consumers are confident enough to keep spending freely despite other economic worries. Consumer spending accounts for almost 3/4 of the U.S. economy. As promised, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is proposing new rules that would lower overdraft fees from the current average of $26. In other words, if you overdraw your account on a $3 cup of coffee with the fee, that coffee is now almost $30. The nation's largest banks are expected to push back.
That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm John Michael, WTN News.
Well, let me tell you about the good people over at DT McCall's. Now, first thing you need to know is that they've been around in this part of the world selling goods to the good people of Middle Tennessee for more than 100 years, more than a century. And you don't get to be in a place and have that kind of long, successful run without a history of doing things right and treating people respectfully. And that's what they're going to do. I mean, they respect you enough to give you an honest price. I mean, they'll give you a price and they'll say, here's the real price, and it's a good price. And this includes delivery and setup and the haul away and the cords and the hoses and whatever you need to make the doodad work. They're going to give you all of that. And it's going to be a good price. Now, you may go to a big box store and they quote you a wonderful price. You say, well, that's a good price. Be very careful. Does that include delivery? No, there's a charge for that. Does that include the setup? No, there's a charge for that. Does that include the haul away of the old thing? Well, sometimes they won't even do that. And you find out that price that they gave you, well, it looked pretty good at the beginning, but it really wasn't very good at all, was it? No, they don't play that game. They just give you a good, honest, decent price, and then they do what they say they're going to do. They'll never charge you extra for setup, delivery, or haul away. One of the things I love about them is they try to, whenever possible, sell products that are made in Middle Tennessee, and that's a good thing. I mean, England furniture is not made in England at all. It's made in Tennessee. They got a mattress line that's made in Middle Tennessee. It's a great mattress, and I tell you, I have one. I'm telling you, I love it. You will too. Find out about all the things they can do for you and your home by going to their website, dtmccalls.com. "41 minutes now past the hour of 6 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. A few minutes left here in the show before we hand it over to Mark Levin, the great one, who will carry on through the evening, as he often does. He does a lot of carrying on, he does. And it's usually right on the point. I tell you, I love listening to Mark Levin. I like it when they say, he's here. He's here. I'm excited. I want to know. We made contact with our leader. Okay, a lot of stuff I want to try to cover, stuff that I wanted to shove into the show, but I just haven't had a chance to do it yet. Biden will classify the Houthis as sort of a terrorist, but not real terrorists. The Houthi rebels of Yemen, it took a direct missile attack, according to hotair.com, on an American cargo ship to make it happen. But he will reportedly add the Houthi militants in Yemen back to the designated list of terrorists at long last. It's a different list, but it's a terrorist list nonetheless. I don't know what's going on with this guy. He wouldn't know a threat to this country if it bit him on the ankle. And this comes as Iran has actually claimed responsibility for missile strikes that exploded near the U.S. consulate in Iraq's semi-autonomous Kurdish region late Monday. Iran's Revolutionary Guard said they targeted a spy headquarters and a gathering of anti-Iranian terrorist groups near Erbil, the capital and the most populated city in Kurdistan. You know, we're still in there. We're big. We got, like we say, we got a consulate there. 4 civilians were killed, 6 wounded in the attack that saw 10 missiles rain down in the area near the U.S. consulate, the Security Council of the Kurdish Regional Government said. There you go. U.S. Navy announces the first seizure of Iranian weapons bound for Yemen, but it came at a price. 2 Navy SEALs remain lost from that mission. The first seizure of Iranian weapons bound for Yemen since the Houthi rebels began their campaign, according to Fox News. Yet the 2 Navy SEALs lost at sea during the mission carried out last week still remain missing amid search and rescue efforts. January 11th, while conducting a flag verification, U.S. CENTCOM Navy forces conducted a nighttime seizure of a ship showing conducting illegal transport of advanced lethal aid from Iran to resupply the Houthi forces in Yemen. Navy SEALs operating from the USS Lower B Pillar, supported by helicopters and unmanned aerial vehicles (UAVs), executed a complex boarding of the ship near the coast of Somalia in international waters of the Arabian Sea, seizing Iranian-made ballistic missile and cruise missile components. Now, yeah, good for you, man. I love that. It is sad, however, that this came at such a high cost. A reminder that freedom isn't free, but I mean, we need to stop the resupply of the Houthis, and God bless our Navy SEALs. They get out there and they do the dirty work, sometimes at a very high cost. President Trump was back in the courtroom today for this case brought by E. Jean Carroll. It's a defamation case, and it sort of got ugly at some point. Mr. Trump has the right to be present here, said the judge. That right can be forfeited, and it can be forfeited if he is disruptive, which is what has been reported to me. If he disregards court orders, Mr. Trump, I won't have to consider excluding you from this trial. I understand you're probably eager for me to do that, the judge said. Trump said, I would love it. I know you would, Kaplan said back. You just can't control yourself in this circumstance, apparently. Trump muttered back, you can't either. Talking back to the judge. Apparently, Carroll's lawyer complained that Trump needed to keep his voice down. He continued to make comments about the case that were audible to jurors, including that the trial is a witch hunt and a con job. Okay. Hunter Biden. JustTheNews.com. Boy, I tell you, if you want to stay on top of that story, nobody's doing a better job of covering that than JustTheNews.com. John Solomon, he's there's a lot of stuff out there that's garbage, but John Solomon is a guy who worked for some pretty good news organizations. Now he covers this kind of stuff and has his own website, and he's got this stuff buttoned up. Alleged foreign agent law violations loom over Hunter Biden as the House prepares to depose him. Yeah, they're going to depose him. They're going to get him behind closed doors. Apparently that's being worked out now. And it's going to be done the way the House insisted that it be done, not the way that Abby Lowell wanted it to be done. So violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act have been overlooked in the impeachment inquiry, but new registration and an opportunity for Hunter Biden to appear for the committee may bring them to the forefront. These would be FARA violations, things that he could be charged with in a court of law. Again, they aren't going after Hunter so much as trying to find out exactly how much Dad was involved in the thing. Here's where Dad was involved. JustTheNews.com again. Art dealer told Congress that Joe Biden called and met him while he sold Hunter Biden's paintings. Now, we were told that there was not going to be any contact, that they would never know who the buyers were. George Burgess says the first son made unusual requests to know the identity of buyers, undercutting a White House narrative. The art dealer who sold Hunter Biden's paintings told Congress that President Joe Biden both called and met him at the White House as he was pitching Hunter's artwork, and that the first son also made an unusual request to be informed about who bought his pieces, according to testimony that directly undercuts the White House narrative on the issue. The Biden White House told the public that Hunter art sales were covered by an ethics agreement to ensure they were at arm's length, and that the first family, Hunter included, would be blind to the identity of the buyers. Not so, says George Burgess, owner of the prestigious Burgess Art Galleries, based in New York and Berlin, that sold Hunter Biden's paintings from 2020 to 2023. Told congressional impeachment investigators his son likely knew the identity of 70% of the buyers, the largest of whom were, wait for it, you know what's coming, Democrat donors, and that Hunter Biden's first contract made an unusual request when the relationship started. I believe in the first contract he was able to know who the buyers were. So everything they told us about that turns out not to be true. Let me just add this story. Again, we're learning more and more and more about COVID-19, and more it's beginning to look like that thing they told you was a conspiracy, that it started in a lab in Wuhan, China, and it is apparently true. And here's something else. The Chinese officials apparently knew pretty much what they had 2 weeks before they shared it with the rest of the world. And when they shared it with the rest of the world, they did such in such a backdoor way as that nobody really noticed that they were sharing it with the world. Valuable time was lost in trying to decide, how do you fight this virus that's going around? What is it? Documents obtained, according to the Wall Street Journal. They really did the heavy lift on this. From the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services by a House committee reviewed by the Wall Street Journal show that a Chinese researcher in Beijing uploaded a nearly complete sequence of the virus's structure to a U.S. government-run database on December 28th of 2019. Chinese officials at the time were still publicly describing the outbreak as a viral pneumonia of unknown causes, and they had yet to close down the Hunan seafood wholesale market where they had so many of the initial outbreaks. They didn't really come clean for almost a full year on all of this. You may have thought, they may have said it was a theory, and that you were being wild-eyed radicals by believing it, but more and more, we were right from the very beginning. 50 minutes now past the hour. Johnny Fleeman, the owner of the Brass Lantern and Legends restaurants, wants to celebrate 35 years of serving Middle Tennessee. That's quite a landmark, isn't it? Really? They want to wish everybody a happy new year, although we're well into the month of January. And here, to celebrate their 35 years, they want me to tell you about their daily specials. Monday, fresh breaded chicken fingers with fries and coleslaw, only $8.99. Tuesday, slow-cooked prime rib and a side for $18.99. Wednesday, 6-ounce choice sirloin with a side, only $8.99. Thursday is hamburger steak day. Ooh, I love a good hamburger steak, $8.99. Sundays, 3 pasta dinners, each of them $9.99. Remember, for over 35 years, the Brass Lantern and Legends restaurants has given you authentic, made from scratch, delicious recipes at affordable prices. And they want you to also think about them when it comes time for lunch. Their daily lunch specials start at $6.99. And also along the way, don't forget to pick up some of those delicious Johnny Fleeman products at your local grocery store. You're going to love your next visit to the Brass Lantern or Legends restaurant nearest you.